Anyway, quick run through broodmare nutrition and feeding, and summarise some of the things that I'm sure most of you know, and try and point out some of the things that I think are most important about feeding your mare. So good nutrition of the mare, vital for fertility and productivity, and it can make a difference throughout in the health and growth of the foal and the performance throughout its life, and a particular emphasis on the pregnant mare. I think getting it right in the pregnant mare in terms of both nutrition and maintaining health and the right combination of exercise are all really important, so you get long-term benefits out of that. Obviously, getting the balance right at the time of service, important to ensure fertility. And one of the things you don't want there is a mare that's losing weight, because they'll be less fertile at that stage. So one of the key things we're going to think about is body weight, or body condition and weight. And one of the troubles on thoroughbred farms is that mare owner perceptions mean that mares often need to be kept fatter than they should be for their health and performance. And I heard Katie talk about the downsides of fat mares and foaling, but I'll certainly talk about it as well. So what we want with most mares is what I call straight line nutrition, where the mare stays in, we'll call it good body condition throughout the year, and we don't have any great deviations. If we get deviations in energy supply, then we make it up with what we're doing with supplementary forage. So if the pasture is not delivering as much energy, then we give more from the forage and the hard feed. There's no benefit in flushing mares. Flushing them is something that happens in sheep, where you get them skinny and then want to put weight on them. No benefit in that, apart from maiden mares, particularly those maidens that might come from the track in August, and people want to get them covered in September. So yes, you do need to put weight on those mares. On the other hand, even though fat mares is not ideal, we want to avoid major weight loss too. So we've got consequences of both underfeeding and overfeeding, and this slide applies to both, say, energy and minerals, but reduced fertility and some sort of outcomes that are unacceptable in the younger horse, with lower value young horses from underfeeding. And but when we get into overfeeding, actually we often get worse consequences from that. And the metabolic issues related to insulin dysregulation, particularly from overfed mares, laminitis, increased risk of colic, and then some increased developmental orthopedic disease risks in the foal are all things that you want to avoid. The best friend you have in a feeding program for mares is green grass. And this term, Dr. Green, was coined, I think, by Twink Allen, who was a famous New Zealand veterinarian, worked at Animal Health Trust in Newmarket, and he coined the really showing the benefits, the health benefits for the mare of green grass. Great supply of a lot of key nutrients, and they're things that you don't get from hay and haylage. So things like vitamin A and E and K that are at high levels in green grass, when you cut that and make it into hay, those levels decline rapidly. So you're getting some real benefits out of green feed. And of course, that comes down to whether you've got irrigation, if you do, or whether you've had rainfall. And it's great that many areas of Australia have had a lot of rain this week, and should set them up in better shape for the season than they were otherwise. So one of the things that you can assess about the nutrition of your horses is energy supply. And there are many nutrients we talk about that you can't measure at all, really. Blood tests are pretty useless. So you've got to do sort of nutrient intake calculations. Hair analysis is worse than useless, apart from toxicity. And so energy supply you can assess by looking at the body condition or body weight of the horse. Horses that are in a positive energy balance will gain weight. If they're losing weight, they're in a negative energy balance. There are some farms that get to weigh mares, particularly as they go through the crush, and I think that's a good management tool and can help pinpoint weight loss much quicker than you would gauge by looking at the mare. So most of you are looking at the mares and doing some sort of subjective or objective body condition scoring. And you're looking at both the rump, the ribs and back, and the neck. There are two different systems used for body condition scoring. This is the Australian one, 0 to 5 scale using half points. And I guess we're wanting mares to be in body condition score, say 3 good to 3.5. Some of them are obviously going to verge on body condition score 4 or fat. The American system is a 1 to 9 scale, the Henneke one that was designed around quarter horse mares in Texas, and that's a very common system used in the veterinary literature. But I think the Australian one's superior, and that's because I designed it many years ago. So let's look at mares of different body condition and some of the consequences that are going on. So we've got thin mares here. These are body condition score less than 2 or moderate, and they'll have some outcomes that they're less efficient reproductively, longer gestations, longer interovulatory periods, lower pregnancy rates, and it will influence the foal size. If you've got a thin lactating mare, or you've got a lactating mare that's losing weight, they'll be less reproductively efficient, and they will also produce less milk, provided the weight loss is up to a certain point, and the foal will slow down its growth. So you want to avoid that in most cases. There are some cases probably you might want to do that. So some of those foals that Angus talked about that were starting to toe in, big strong foals, heavily topped foals, you know, some of those may benefit from a little bit less calorie intake in the milk. Now, what about the opposite, the fat late pregnant mare? And this is something that we really want to avoid, not just for the reasons that Katie spoke of about dystochias. There is no big effect on the size of the foal or the growth rate of the foal from having your late pregnant mare fat. And very often you'll get more difficult foalings and you'll get worse recovery after foaling. You'll certainly get more angular limb deformities, more flexural deformities. So there's many negative reasons for having your mare too fat. You've got a higher risk of laminitis relating to insulin dysregulation. So this is really something you want to avoid. So ideal body condition for mares, body condition score 3, 3.5, maybe verging on 4. The problem is some of the pastures we have are very productive, and they've been bred for productivity in dairy cows and sheep, the grass seeds, and they can be exceptionally productive pastures, and mares can eat a lot. So if there's enough grass there, mares can get a massive energy boost out of good pasture. And particularly then when it's matched with some of the higher energy feeds that are around these days, as we put more fat into horse feeds, we get more energy into them. And that may have some benefits in being able to supply energy without an overload of starch, but it just adds to the energy intake of the horse. So what are the things that obesity can do to reproduction? Here's an interesting, some research that was done looking at feeding mares different amounts of energy. So pregnant mares fed to be in either good body condition score or fat. There was no difference in when they foaled, ovulations after foaling, pregnancy rate. Hey, the feed bill was twice as much. And of course, that had a greater risk of laminitis. But didn't help you reproductively to get these mares really heavy. Other studies, there have been a number of them about fat mares, have shown things that are detrimental, changes in ovarian function relating to the follicles and cyclicity, endometrial health, and also early embryonic loss. So it's something I think that you really want to avoid. Now, what about the impact on the foal birth weight? People think, oh, if I get my mare in better condition, then she'll have a bigger foal and that'll be good. Foal birth weight studies on that have shown it's related to the parity of the mare. So the slide on the right hand side there is from a study that we've done at a farm in Kentucky. where maiden mares have had foals that were sort of 6 kilos lighter than older mares. The age of the mare has an impact. Older mares often have smaller foals. Placental weight will have an impact up to a point. And of course, the size of the mare and the stallion. But it's unrelated to the feeding of the mare, gestation length, or to racing success, except at the extremes. And so I'll mention those extremes shortly. So what are the extremes? The very high body weight foal, high birth weight foal, more dystocia. UK study shown that mares that had foals bigger than 62 kilos had a lower fertility the following year than those that had foals that were less than 62 kilos. And those foals are far more likely to have conformational abnormalities and flexural deformities. On the other hand, the very low birth weight foals, and some of these are either because of placentitis or premature foaling or disturbances during pregnancy, less viable, smaller yearlings and lower value foals very often. We've just done some work in a pilot study looking at the relationship between growth and survey X-rays and then sales success and racing success, and we're looking to repeat that on a larger scale around the world. And it's shown a couple of things about the very small foals. So these are the foals in the bottom quartile. So the smallest 25% of foals. It was great. They had a lower incidence of OCD in all joints than the big foals did, but they were also less likely to be stakes winners, and particularly this related to both weight and height. They can win races, but they've certainly got less likely to be stakes winners. Now, what about weight gain during pregnancy? So a study in England looked at feeding maiden mares different amounts of grain to get them to gain weight. So we got a big weight gain in the high energy intake group. They put on 140 kilos versus 100 kilos in the moderate group. And what did that do? Increased the placental area, increased the weight of fetal fluids, but there was no difference in the birth weight, the placental weight, or the average daily gain of foals after foaling. So something that didn't give you any great benefits except putting up the feed bill. On the other hand, weight loss during pregnancy of a significant degree can have an impact on growth of the foal. And the same study, half the mares got strangles mid-pregnancy. And this caused some really significant weight loss. So really usually we're talking about disease or drought in these circumstances, but significant weight losses, and that reduced the placental area and efficiency, and it reduced the length of some of these foals at birth and also at weaning. So some of these effects that you see at birth, you're then going to get long-term effects. So this didn't result, maybe if the weight loss had been later in pregnancy, it would have resulted in weight loss, in birth weight loss rather than foal length loss. So how are we going to feed our mare at different stages of the reproductive cycle? We've really got 3 stages here. And some of them, of course, are combinations because we mostly want our lactating mare also to be early pregnant. So our dry mares, we're going to look at those that are in light body condition and flush them. And so this will be maidens and maybe some really older dry mares or mares that have come through a drought. And ideally, we're going to get some grass into them so we get the Dr. Green effect of pasture. Maidens certainly need to be looked after, avoiding the pecking order. You don't just throw them out with a bunch of older mares that are going to terrorise them and keep them away from the feed bin, and often they need to be fed extra. So dry mares, pretty easy to feed them mostly because they don't have any extra demands unless they're a maiden mare or they're an older mare that's starting to lose some digestive efficiency or have poorer teeth. I think all mares should have their teeth done through winter on a farm, and so if you get their teeth in good shape, they're usually pretty easy to keep in good condition. Maidens, if they're thin and they come late, you know, they come in July or August, then you need weight gain. And as well as and that weight gain can be achieved by rugging them, because they'll come with a thin coat out of racing. So keeping the rugs on them, putting them in at night under lights, or putting equilooms on them. Small groups are preferred, and they always need to be fed more than other dry mares when they come to the farm late. If they've been there for a few months, much easier to get them in the right shape with a bigger group of dry mares. Now, in early pregnancy, there's not a lot of difference between the nutrient requirements and that of maintenance. So forage has got to be the most prominent component of the ration. Don't need a lot of hard feed in most cases in this situation. So the early pregnant dry mare is pretty easy to feed. Of course, the early pregnant lactating mare, it's the requirements of lactation that you're feeding. So the wet mare is going to be fed differently to the dry mare in these circumstances. And with the dry mare, you're wanting to avoid overfeeding, and you're wanting to avoid getting them fat, because if you get them fat, then it's difficult to get that weight off them throughout pregnancy. Second half of pregnancy, we're starting to get significant growth of the fetus, and so the energy requirements go up, but the protein and mineral needs go up to a greater degree. And things like copper and zinc and selenium are really important at this stage in the last sort of 5 months of pregnancy, and that's because the milk is a poor source of these, and they're stored in the fetal liver. And there have been a number of studies looking at supplementation of trace minerals and showing the benefits, the importance of getting these minerals into them in late pregnancy in terms of reduced developmental orthopedic disease and reduced OCD incidence. Vitamin A is important. If you've got vitamin A, would be added to most feeds and balancer pellets, but it's also there in green grass. And but if you've got a drought and you've got no green grass and you've got no vitamin A, if you're just feeding an oats-based diet, for example, with hay, you could keep mares in good condition, but they would be vitamin A deficient, and you get long-term impacts on the size of the foal and the growth of the foal. You want to avoid fatness, as I said, but you want to avoid weight loss. Now, depending on the pasture you've got or the supplementary forage in terms of hay, the extra energy needs will vary. And very often this is a time when it's a good time to supplement them just with a balancer pellet. For a lot of mid-pregnancy, you can do that. Concentrated source of minerals and vitamins, not too many extra calories. But if you want to add extra calories, you can do that with oats or other energy sources. So balancer pellets are great for this sort of mid-pregnancy, after weaning stage, and through into late pregnancy if there's good feed. What about some things that you might want to pay attention to in late pregnancy and their impact on the foal? One of those is selenium, and some nice studies looking at giving supplementary selenium to mares and showing impacts on cholesterol immunoglobulin levels and immunoglobulin levels in the foal. Now, selenium becomes more important if you're in a low selenium area. So these are places like Western Australia, like the Hunter Valley, or like sort of coastal areas of Victoria through Gippsland. So in those areas, pay more attention to the selenium content of your supplement or feed. Vitamin E, the same sort of thing. Vitamin E, more important in a drought situation, or where you're relying on, you don't have any green grass and you're relying on hay. But again, showing supplementation with vitamin E before foaling improved immune transfer in the foals. Now, what about omega-3 fatty acids? And many of us take fish oil ourselves for the health benefits of that, but they can certainly have some health benefits for horses, and that may be both during late pregnancy and also after foaling when you're trying to get the mare back in foal. So we've got reproductive benefits. So a number of studies in various species showing benefits from omega-3 fatty acids in various areas of reproduction. And I think I'll focus on probably the early embryonic loss and the anti-inflammatory properties perhaps relating to placentitis are two things that people could relate to. There's certainly there'll be a few mares now being treated for placentitis, and that may benefit from some long-chain omega-3 fatty acid supplementation. Interesting, the coordination aspect too. Human work suggesting improved coordination. I guess we're trying to breed athletes, and coordination is one of those factors. Omega-3 fatty acids. There's two different types of omega-3 fatty acids we consider. There's the short-chain 18 carbon types that we might get from, say, soybean oil, canola oil, or linseed oil. And there's the long-chain biologically active forms, the EPA and DHA, that you're only going to get from fish oil or from the very slow conversion of omega-3 fatty acids from the short-chain form. So, some more summaries of the research related to reproduction in horses: better biopsy scores, reduced post-breeding inflammatory responses, and some influences on gene expression. So, as well as faster involution of the gravid horn after foaling. So, I think there's a number of benefits from adding DHA and EPA, but it's probably a special needs mare situation, because this is not something you can put in the feed. And if you're adding it as a supplement, it's something that you sort of want to avoid on a routine basis, but you might do it to special mares. So the anti-inflammatory effect can have an impact on early embryonic loss or placentitis, something that you may want to give to selected mares. Green grass effect with its omega-3 fatty acid content is really important. And interestingly, we've just put a summary of some recent research about the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids and antioxidants on aging mares. And this was focusing on ovarian function and follicular function. So, and that's on Equinews. And I'll give a plug for a free education site that we have on our website, Equinews. Fantastic library of articles on nutrition, on health and general interest. You can put a search function in, or you can sign up for a fortnightly electronic newsletter that comes to your inbox every Wednesday or every second Wednesday. So what's happening in the last month before foaling? The mare doesn't eat as much. They've got this big foal and placental fluids inside them. Their digestibility of feed's reduced. And so the quality of feed becomes important. And it's a good time to look to transition the mare to more lucerne hay if you're going to be feeding them hay after foaling, because that's a much better source of protein and calciums than grass hay would be, and adjust to the feed that you're going to use after foaling. That adjustment's important. So our key factors in late pregnancy: adjust the concentrate to forage supply so that you don't get the mare fat, but give the extra trace minerals. The copper, the zinc, manganese are really important. Vitamin E and selenium are both useful for immune function in the mare, immune transfer in the mare, but also for fertility too, in terms of the benefits in the mare after foaling. Vitamin A, green grass, really has long-term impacts on the foal growth, and omega-3 fatty acids can be useful for special needs mares. Now, the lactating mare, what's going on there? We've got a massive increase in the energy needs, the protein, and the amino acid needs, and that all relates to milk production. And it seems that mares, foals are growing faster, and that can only be, that's a genetic thing, but part of that genetics is about the amount of milk mares can make. And it seems like these days you get some mares that are just making massive amounts of milk and fueling growth rates of 2 and 3 kilos a day early in a foal's life. So the requirements of the mare will be proportional to the milk production. But with most mares, you're wanting to get them back in foal on their first cover, so you can't afford to have them losing weight. The mare protects the milk production by drawing on her own reserves, as she's not getting them on a daily basis. But you don't want to draw on her own reserves, because that will make her reproductively less efficient. At this time, lots of high quality forage is really important, and often they'll require high concentrate intakes too, much higher than, say, a pregnant mare. And I think one of the mistakes farms make is the too little difference between what they feed the pregnant mare and the dry mare and what they feed the lactating mare. You certainly want to avoid major weight loss. A couple of times where you've got to pay particular attention would be the early foaling mares, the later foaling mares, so winter pastures or the summer pastures. That's in southern Australia. It's possibly might be the opposite in Queensland, but they have really different energy content and protein content. And so mares foaling at the start or the end of the season probably going to need more energy from the concentrate and may need hay offer that they don't need in the middle of the season when you've got some good spring feed. One of the important times to feed mares is when they're in yards and stables, and lactating mares pretty much need ad-lib forage at that time, and it should be a decent amount of lucerne forage. Oaten hay, not so good because it has a lower protein content, so they'll need to eat a lot of it to satisfy their protein and amino acid needs. So it doesn't have to be all lucerne hay, but certainly a good proportion of it being lucerne is important. So when pasture's good, you may only need a balancer pellet. There's lots of mares in New Zealand, for example, thoroughbred mares that, or in the Northern Hemisphere, mares that foal later in the year, go out on good grass, and they only need a balancer pellet. And the same thing applies here if you've got enough good pasture. Special needs mares, older mares, big milking mares, and but the ideal feed for mares is probably going to be something that's a sort of moderate energy feed, moderate starch feed, low glycemic feed. You know, we don't want a super high energy feed, and I think we're wanting to avoid too much starch, and partly because we don't want the foal really getting too much in the way of grain, of energy and starch from the mare's feed bin. One thing, you will reduce the weaning setback by feeding the mare and foal what you're going to feed the foal after weaning before weaning. But at the same time, then you want to drop the concentrate off with the mare because it will make the mare dry up faster. So weight loss during lactation is something to avoid because it affects reproductive efficiency. What sort of weight loss is significant? I reckon 20 kilos a month is probably significant for the foal growth rate. And, you know, many of these are confined mares. So the mares that are locked up in yards, the ones that have had the bridges done and are being confined, they need plenty of hay. So my summary is on the important things about mare nutrition and fertility that you want. You don't want to have big changes in body condition and weight throughout the year. You want straight line nutrition, except for maidens who definitely need to gain weight before they go into the serving barn, and you want to obviously try and get your maidens covered early in the year. You've got to be careful about mares losing significant amounts of weight because they're sick or they're off feed during pregnancy, and you've got to avoid weight loss after foaling, as the mare will be more difficult to get in foal or keeping foal there. Grazing is your number one friend as far as the feed. Trace minerals important late pregnancy, antioxidants before foaling, and omega-3 fatty acids can have some benefits for difficult mares. If you're looking for more information, we've got this searchable library, we've got Equinews, and we also have I did a longer version of a Broodmare nutrition seminar, and that's on a YouTube channel. So KR has got a YouTube channel. You could find that one if you want to hear things in more detail or without quite the speed that we've put into tonight's presentation. But thanks for your interest, and happy to take some questions from you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was very good. Now, we do have some questions here already. We've got, would you recommend giving a foal an individualised diet if it's damaged on a grain-free diet due to insulin resistance?
The question about the foal, I mean, foals, if the foal is abnormal, then yes, I would look at having an individualised diet. And I mean, pregnant mares get insulin resistant, and that can then be transferred to the foal in terms of abnormalities about their insulin metabolism. But yeah, I think you would, without going into the detail about what I recommend, then I would recommend an individual diet. But remembering that you know, horses are herd animals, and foals need to be kept in groups, and exercise is really important. So you've got to sort of be able to do that from a paddock with another foal as company.
We've got here from Susan, if you do not have access to green pasture, what feed do you recommend for mares prior to serving with the stallion to increase weight body condition for a thin mare who's around 15 years of age? And then to continue to maintain weight during pregnancy, particularly with relation to mares who are fence walkers or have high metabolism, assuming there are no other health conditions and her teeth have been done.
Okay. There's a long question there, a lot to remember
There's
at
a few
this
in
time, isn't it? Okay, so with our older mare, many old thoroughbreds, or many thoroughbreds are poor doers anyway. Older ones are poorer doers. Maybe sort of look at, with that age mare, looking, is she a PPID mare? So talking to your vet about diagnosis of that, because that's one reason why they lose condition, and they'll become reproductively less efficient if they do have PPID. But what you want is a sort of highly digestible forage, lucerne hay being the best of those, or some of the lucerne haylages are good. So New Zealand produces some nice lucerne haylages, fibre fresh, that is pretty digestible, or ryegrass and clover hay is another good one. And we then got to look at what sort of concentrates we feed horses and how much we feed them. And that's, really has to be balanced according to the individual situation. But a well-made, a well-formulated, moderate energy feed, highly that's pretty digestible. And you may want to look at supplementary energy from oil or Equidual or something like that, that really is a more concentrated source of energy. And I'd be also doing the mare's teeth as well. And the last bit would be thinking about pecking order effects. So maybe you've got to keep that mare in a smaller group rather than with a whole mob of mares.
Okay, and we've got a few more here. What percentage of lift should we give our last trimester mares for trace minerals?
What percentage? So it becomes more, rather than looking at percentages, what we're looking at is we're wanting intake levels. So we're wanting to meet the requirements in the last trimester. And so if you're feeding the recommended amount of a well-fortified, well-formulated feed, you should be able to do that in last trimester. But seeking professional advice and doing the calculations is probably what I'd recommend.
Okay, and we've got one more here from Amy. What are your opinions on a rising plan of nutrition in pregnant or dry mares? Is there an appropriate way to introduce it?
So the rising plan of nutrition is only needed in dry mares if the mare's thin, if she's a maiden. If she's in good condition, you don't need it, and there's no benefit in that. Pregnant mares, again, would only be necessary if the mare was thin. So mare in good condition, we don't need a rising plan of nutrition. Best way to introduce any nutritional change is to do it slowly. And you want to change, if you're changing your feed, you're changing your hay, do it over 7 days. And if you're increasing the amount you feed, again, do it over 7 days, because you reduce the risk of colic and other digestive disturbances.
Okay, and we've got one more from Kelly here. With placentatis mares, when do you start giving omega-3?
Oh, okay. If I would probably be giving it, if you've got a mare with placentitis, you give it at the time of diagnosis, or you would give it perhaps throughout pregnancy if it was a mare who'd had placentitis before. Or if you just wanted to give it for the benefits pre-foaling or after foaling, then you may start giving it about a month before foaling.